So programming and accessories and just the methodology around the sport of weightlifting is an art in itself. But what I want to do is give you a very brief overview of the programming, because we could dive into the weeds forever. But I want to kind of guide you along this process from beginner all the way up to advanced and really look at the best practices for each step of the way. So what we're looking for is stimulus and adaptation. Stimulus, adaptation. So if we look at a beginner, the stimulus is going to happen immediately just by way of working on the technique. And so what we need to do is just kind of spam them and inundate them with as many reps with just the barbell, maybe slightly heavier than that, as we can, continuously working on technique. Now, the beginner is lucky because on the side of that, because the load they're working with is not very heavy, they can go on to do accessory movements that we'll talk about in a second, but things like the squats, the pulls, the presses, all of those things at the same time. But as far as organizing their training in the snatch and the clean and jerk, it's not really that important. What's more important is just getting more and more and more and more reps. A very hard-line thing you should think of if you're a beginner is actually doing less volume intraset. So taking time in between each singular effort so that you can take time to focus and grab what you need to grab and then move on. If we hold on to the bar and we do a lot of reps and a lot of different complexes, our form starts to break down. And as a beginner, we don't really know how to fix that, especially now under fatigue. So my suggestion is to do a lot of singles. Now we can enter into the realm of drilling. Off the top of my head, if we look at the snatch, one of the best drills we can do is the no-foot snatch. We can also do no-hook with that no-foot snatch. And the reason why it's such an effective movement is because it just takes your mind off of everything. You have to keep your feet solidly planted on the floor. You don't have a hook grip, so you're just slowly moving and you make contact and you catch overhead. Okay, what that does is it puts a governor on how much weight you can actually lift, and you're just breaking it down to its core concepts that are important. Another movement that's going to help a lot across the board is the slow pull snatch or the slow pull clean. Much like in the demos that I did in the previous videos, controlling off of the floor, getting used to that is going to help you tremendously. So that's really what we're looking for in the beginners. I don't want to dive into programming and the ins and outs too much, because for a beginner, you just need more reps. You just got to do more drilling and more technique work. Now, if we move on to intermediate, say you've been in the biz now, you're in it for 6 months to a year. This is where you should start pushing towards maximal lifts. People hear maximal lifts and they automatically go, oh crap, that is dangerous. It's maximal lifts with maximal technical proficiency. One does not live without the other. So your mindset isn't really the weight, it's I'm going to do this the best way that I can and the best way that I know without breaking down my technique, and then I'm going to do the next one and I'm going to do the next one. When the technique starts to break, that's where you should stay. It may not be your absolute max in the snatch, like say, you don't have the best technique, you miss a rep. That's not your maximum because you could hit it on the 3rd or 4th or 5th try, but it might be your technical maximum. But once we reach that maximal number, then we can start doing percentage work. And once we have percentage work, we want to, as a general guideline, stick around 75 to 85%. That is where the vast majority of everyone who trains Olympic weightlifting is training. Always. Okay? Why is that so effective? Well, we build capacity. We build our ability to have a heavy, meaningful bar in our hands and manipulate it technically. And when we can do that, we're essentially building what we call minimums. Think about like an inchworm. An inchworm moves the back end up and then the front end and the back end and the front end. It doesn't strive to just pull itself along by the front and then make the back catch up. Okay? That's how we have to think about our training. We increase our minimums, or our ability, our capacity with the minimums. So we take 75%, we destroy it, we make it so it's so easy, and now maybe we bump up to 80%. Oh man, it's so good, it's so easy, 85%. Okay, let's try that max like we did before. We might not even have to test 90, 95% and above. We might have moved forward. Or we can just continue to move those minimums up. We're starting from this back end and moving forward. And we're utilizing what's called progressive overload. Progressive overload is far and away the most important aspect when we think about periodization. Periodization was coined by a guy named Tudor Bompa. There might have been some other guys who are Russian and whatever. Essentially what it is breaking your macro cycle, which could be a year-long training cycle, breaking it off into periods of training, okay? Broadly, we like to think of it as gaining fitness, just being able to move and do weight training. That's a period in itself. Then we have another period where we're kind of messing with more and more weight, but really we're growing muscle. We can consider this hypertrophy, repetition effort, whatever you might think it might be. In the squats, we'll be doing like 8 to 12 to even 20 reps in this phase. Then we get into a strength phase, okay? In that strength phase, we're pushing maximal lifts. This is more broadly geared towards powerlifting or strength training in general. It might not be the same with the snatch and clean and jerk because there's so much technique. We're in that strength phase. We're getting as strong as we can. Then we pull that weight away a little bit and we say, can we convert that strength into power? Those are generally the periods of training that we're looking for. So if we think about weightlifting, we want to utilize progressive overload throughout that course of periodization. So let's say our first workout, we have a maximal lift of 60 kilos in the snatch. Our first workout could be 5 sets of 3 at 75% of 60 kilos. You just do that. We can keep continuously doing that. We could do that across the whole week. We could come in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, snatch 5 by 3 at 75%. We can go the next week, we can go up to 5 sets of 3 at 80%. And then we could go the next week, 5 sets of 3 at 85%. We could take longer at each percentage. We could go 5 sets of 2 and then bump it up. And there's so many different variables that we could do. But the idea here is that there are periods of training that we attack. And as an intermediate, you start to dabble with those periods. Now, as we get into advanced lifting, this is where our technical proficiency is pretty much embedded within us. We're not going to mess up technically. And if we do, it's because we just had a brain fart. This is where aspects of lifting need to be pushed really, really hard. This is where, in order to adapt, you can't simply do the same back squat workout. You have to push yourself to add more volume. You might have to do more sessions. You might have to do just more frequency in general. These are things that I can't really descriptively give to you right now, but just know that when you get to this advanced level, more is better. It really is. That's the only answer here. And what we're going to see with the advanced level is we're going to see much bigger valleys and times off. So you'll see guys, Liu Xiaojun is a perfect example of this, but COVID had to do with this a little bit. But these guys, they go from incredibly in shape to then nothing for a long time, and then incredibly in shape to nothing. They're creating that peak and valley along with the periodization. Their goal is not to just get better, it's just to get to where they can confidently feel competitive. So that's what you're going to see a lot with advanced lifters. Another thing you're going to see, they're going to push the strength movements, and they're going to go up in weight classes. They're going to do things that cause adaptation because that cup is pretty much empty. All those noob games have been completely squeezed out. So I know it's very broad as far as programming methodology. If you want any other help with that or just want to look at some programs, you can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/Zack Telander. $5. There's like over 40 programs. You can just run those easy. Now I want to talk about accessories. So if we think about a tier system, the first tier, we got snatch, clean and jerk. The second tier, front squat, back squat, okay? Now, when we're looking at the front squat, we could, if we have a strong, capable clean and a maximal clean, we could look at the front squat in relationship to our clean and start really hitting weights that we are cleaning in percentage to our clean. So for instance, instead of having a maximal front squat and working with percentages that are based off of our front squat max, we can work off percentages that are based off of our clean max. Okay, then we can start implementing that minimums. Oh, we're increasing minimums, we're increasing maximums. That is a very effective way to program the front squat. The back squat is incredible. It's incredible for weightlifting. The reason being is because it develops the lower back. Okay, it really, really does. Because the bar is now on your back, there's a slightly more hinge. We can add more weight. So not only are you developing the lower body, the legs, the groins, like everything in your lower body, you're also developing your low back, which is an incredibly underrated aspect of weightlifting. One of the things that I love to do in the back squat, and I think that this might be one of the most underrated movements in training the back squat, is the resting pause back squat. You'll see guys like Klokov do this, right? They'll sit down in the bottom, and you kind of have this upright posture. You sit, and then you stand out of it, making sure that your hip crease is below your knee crease, okay? Getting comfortable with that. And we are now overloaded with weight. We are definitely overloaded with weight. What does this do? Okay, well, for one, it develops our leg strength. And two, we're just getting used to holding heavier weight. But I believe that maximal flexion in your knees and in your hips, it changes the very physiology of your knees. It makes your ligaments and tendons so much more robust and so much more prepared. I remember that I felt like I couldn't pull the bar very well off of the floor. And that's my thing. I have a very big deadlift. I have a 300 kilo deadlift. I felt like I couldn't pull the bar off the floor. I just got frustrated. I'm like, you know what? I want to build my resting pause back squat. I built that sucker up to, I think, 201 kilos, where I sat ass to grass and I stood up. It was a pretty big squat for me. And then I went to snatch, and over the course of 2 years trying to get my snatch back to where it was, I didn't even snatch, and I was able to hit the heaviest weight I'd hit in years, just because of that movement. So there is something there. So now on that third tier, we have the pulls. Very, very important. And the reason why I put them at the third tier is because they're just, in weightlifting, they're just not as important as the front squat and the back squat. The pulls, we have the clean pull, we have the snatch pull, we have kind of a dynamic clean pull. Some people call it a high pull. We have a dynamic snatch pull. We have deficit pulls. There's so many different variations, but it's important here to also, base this off of your clean and jerk or your snatch, where you can go overload. Like if you want to do snatch pulls with something heavier than your snatch, you would just simply say, okay, I'm going to do 110% of my snatch for the snatch pulls. We can also deadlift, RDL, all of these different things, but they're incredibly valuable movements for this overload process. Okay, the idea of periodization is that we can do general things to get better at specific things. And if we wanted to just ignore that, we could just become like the Bulgarians and just snatch, clean and jerk, front squat 3 times a day to maximum. Okay, I would not suggest that to anyone, especially if you don't have the proper supplements. But that's neither here nor there. I hope you guys understand these broad concepts. I know I could dive into this much deeper, but this is the basis. This is the foundation to training in this beautiful sport. So please click subscribe. Check out the rest of these instructional videos, and I'll see you in the next video.